foundation. So let's talk about the classic time to make a Roth conversion. I've been saying this for more than 20 years. So let's say that you're working, your income is way up here, and then you're going to retire. And let's say you retire at 66 and your income goes way down. And let's say, and we're not going to talk about it much today, but let's say you're going to hold off until 70 to collect your Social Security, which is what I usually recommend for the spouse with the higher earnings record. So you're in this low tax bracket between 66 and 70. Then at 70, you have to take your Social Security, or looked at another way, there's no advantage of waiting, but it's still not your full income. And then when you're 72, then you have your minimum required distribution, and you have at least one, or if you're married and you're both over 72, two Social Securities. So your income was here, it's going to go to here, then it's going to go back up. I've always said, make the Roth conversion when you're at your lowest tax bracket, and that still is true. If you're a market timer, which we are not, but if you are, and some people, even though they won't say I'm a market timer, but they have this kind of gut instinct, if you will, that the market's going to go up, the market's going to go down. Obviously, if you think the market's going to go up and you make a Roth IRA conversion, when the market is down, you're going to be getting an even bigger benefit of tax-free income. So usually after retirement, before required minimum distributions, but with the Secure Act and the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017 and the sunset provisions, when we run the numbers, we are finding that more and more people should be making conversions, even if they're still working. And I don't mean for a 25-year-old, although almost certainly for a 25-year-old, but even for people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and people who are already taking minimum required distributions when in the past they were not great candidates. So our environment is changing. Before I go into the next story, though, I've been rattling off for a little bit. I thought I would check to see if there are questions. You know, as Erica mentioned, questions are my favorite part of the workshop. And Erica, I just thought I would check in with you to see if we have any questions. And if we do, I'll take one or two questions. Otherwise, I will go into, let's say, the personalization, if you will, of my own Roth story. Do we have any questions so far, Eric?
We have a bunch of questions, and I wanted to start out with one from Gary. And Gary said that he is getting a little bit ahead of the talk, but it's still about Roth conversions. And he's getting a little bit ahead of the talk because he just finished reading the book. Now, I'm not sure which book, but I suspect it might be an advanced reader copy of a forthcoming book. And he said he's convinced that he wants to do a Roth conversion. He says he has a stock index fund and a bond index fund in his IRA. And he doesn't quite understand the concept of keeping bond funds in the pre-tax environment and the stocks in the post-tax environment, i.e., when I do the conversion, it suggests that I should move the stocks over rather than the bonds. And he was wondering if you could explain that, or if he,
Well, there's two factors here. One, which I would think is maybe even more important than the taxation, which is the time interval or the length of the investment of the Roth IRA conversion. Let me tell you the truth of Roth IRA conversions. Most people, and I'm not just most, but the vast majority of people who make Roth conversions are not going to spend them. If we go to a more basic webinar and I talk about which assets to spend first, I typically say spend your after-tax dollars, then your IRA dollars, and your Roth IRA dollars last. And people instinctively don't want to spend their Roth conversion dollars because they know that that money, if they let it sit, will continue to grow for the rest of their lives. I'm going to talk about the conversion I made, and at the time that I made the big one, which was back in 1998, my plan was that was going to be stretched for the life of our unborn grandchildren. So if you think about that kind of time horizon, or for most of us, let's just say for our lifetime in 10 years, we're talking about a significant long period of time. So what that would suggest is that you want to convert assets that are most likely to do well in the given a long period of investment horizon. So between stocks and bonds, almost always in our country's history, the stocks have outperformed the bonds. So we kind of have a compelling reason to want to convert our assets that we think are going to do better. And if we're going to be more specific, we might even not just do general stocks, we might do stocks or asset classes that have traditionally done better. For example, small companies, value companies over a long period of time have done better than, say, the S&P or a general stock index. So that probably is one of the major, let's say, areas. Now, we used to be able to unconvert. Man, that was fun because we used to convert a whole bunch of different IRAs, and then we would unconvert or recharacterize. We're not allowed to do that anymore. That was so much fun. It's kind of like betting on a horse race after the race is over. We can't do that anymore. But in general, that's the most important thing. Now, in terms of asset location, that is which dollars belong in which type of investments. Well, bonds are a good thing to have in IRAs because if they are income heavy, you're not paying income taxes on the IRAs, where stocks tend to have you tend to have maybe lower dividends than maybe the interest rate, but you hope to get your value in appreciation. So that's why they sometimes like to have stocks in the after-tax environment, bonds in the IRAs. But again, to me, if we're going to do Roth conversions, we're going to want to do that with assets that are more likely to appreciate. I know that my wife and I, we still have it, but when we converted, we had small companies, we had international companies, and we had value companies. And we have, and it's been over 20 years since we converted, we've had much better than average returns, not because we're brilliant stock pickers, but because we invested in asset classes that tended to perform well over time. Why don't we take one more, and then I'm going to move on.
Sounds good. And we will carry over as many of the questions from this morning session and the 1:30 p.m. session to the Q&A as we can. So fear not if your question is in this session but does not get answered. There is a high likelihood that it will be addressed. So Jim, since we were talking about Roths here, Jeff had a question. He said, can you make too many Roth conversions? If so, how do you know if you're close to that point?
Well, since I'm an attorney, I'm going to take any question that I get and answer any other question. So I'm not sure what too many means, but I will rephrase the question. Can you convert too much money? The answer is absolutely yes. In fact, we have found that a bunch of do-it-yourselfers have sometimes over-converted. So let's say, for discussion's sake, that you're going to be in the 22 or 24% tax bracket, and that the projection is that might be the case for the rest of your life. You say, oh boy, I want to make a big Roth conversion, and that way I won't have to take any minimum required distributions, and it'll be great for my kids. So I'm going to make this, $500,000 or even sometimes a couple $100,000, and sometimes even $100,000 more than I might recommend after running the numbers. One, you might bump yourself into a higher tax for Medicare Part B. The other thing that we have found for some do-it-yourselfers, nothing against engineers. My wife has a master's degree in electrical engineering from Carnegie Mellon, so I love engineers, but sometimes they will not necessarily take all the factors into consideration. And if you convert too much, then maybe what will happen is you convert it to 33 or higher percentage, and then you end up in retirement with a small minimum required distribution. So it would turn down to you converted at a higher rate to save taxes at a lower rate. And when you run the numbers in the long run, you'll be worse off than if you hadn't done anything. Of course, the right thing to do is to get it the right amount, which isn't always easy to get it exactly right. But that's the idea, is that we're trying to come up with the right amount to convert. We're also going to try to get the right time to convert. Maybe this isn't a good year, not because of the tax rates, et cetera, but maybe because of your personal situation. Maybe it's a great time to convert. So I think many of you know that our office had a devastating fire in 1998. I was woken out of my sound sleep to come watch my business literally up in flames. The good news was the important papers were all in fireproof drawers, so I can tell my will clients that I store your documents in tested fireproof drawers. But basically, it more or less wiped out the office, and I had to move literally within days. This is in February 16th, so we're talking about the beginning of tax season. I was well insured, but I didn't get the insurance proceeds until the next year. So, let's say before 1998, my income was up here. 1998, my income was down here. And then after 98, after 99, et cetera, when I was going to get the insurance proceeds and business was going to be back to normal, and normal for us is a constant growth in our business, it was back up to here. So I knew that we were in this low income tax bracket for myself and my wife, who, again, she's a sharp cookie and she does not like paying taxes. And I said to her, hey, I think we ought to make a Roth IRA conversion of our entire retirement plan, which was $250,000. And she did not want to do it. But one of the good things about engineers, even though, don't take this the wrong way, even though they can be a tiny bit stubborn, and even though they think because they're experts in one area that makes them experts in other areas, they do tend to be, not always, but tend to be what I call data-driven. Meaning if you show them on a spreadsheet with assumptions that they can accept, okay, here's if you don't do anything, here's if you do a series of Roth conversions, or in our case, here's if you do a big Roth conversion in 1998, here's if you don't. And back then they didn't have all the fancy software that we have. It looked like we were going to be hundreds of thousands, actually more than $1 million better off. So the numbers said to convert everything. And that's what we did. And by the way, we learned an additional lesson from that fire. We were right above a pizza shop, and the fire was caused by an electrical problem with some of the equipment in the pizza shop. And one of the additional lessons is never put your office above a pizza shop. We are now not above a pizza shop because we literally had to move within days. But anyway, the point is that I put my money where my mouth is. We continued to make Roth IRA conversions. We continued to make Roth 401k conversions. We continued to make backdoor Roth conversions, which we'll talk about. And the results for our family, and this is in today's dollars, not future dollars, is that our daughter will be $1.9 million better off. Now, to be fair, since she has a disability, she will be able to stretch that inherited Roth IRA for her lifetime instead of just 10 years. But even if it was just 10 years, we would still be more than $1 million better off. So it's really important. And by the way, so one of the problems that I and frankly a lot of the people that I tend to attract on these webinars is that a lot of us are quantitative and we love to think about numbers, and we hear, oh, we'll be better off by $1.8 million, or our kids will. And even if we say in today's dollars, we don't really think about, we're really changing the lives for ourselves and our kids. If we significantly cut our taxes for ourselves and our kids, we are just doing our family an enormous service. And the difference between getting this right and not only not getting it wrong, but let's say doing nothing, is often hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I sometimes don't think about the human impact of what we are doing. But one of the nice things about having done this for so long, 35 years total, and maybe about 22 doing Roth conversions, is we are seeing the benefits now of doing those Roth conversions back then. And so even if you're thinking more of it in terms of math, which is what I tend to do, it's also good to think about the impact on your family and the safety and the security of not only ourselves, but our children, who I think are going to have a much tougher road to hoe and a tougher environment in order to be financially comfortable without money that we leave them and without being smart about money that we leave them. So after I said, wow, this is going to be great, we're going to save over $1 million for my family. And if you have not recognized this by now, I am a proselytizer. No, I'm not going to try to change your religion, but I am going to try to show the benefits of a Roth IRA conversion. And I wanted to do this for as many IRA and retirement plan owners as I could. So what does a doctor do when they have maybe a new drug or a new treatment or something like that, and they want credibility? They go to a journal that is peer-reviewed, meaning that other doctors look very closely at the studies that they performed, at the protocols of the study, the results, is the article fair, et cetera, et cetera. And if it meets all those criteria, which is pretty difficult, then they will publish it. And probably the best known is the New England Journal of Medicine, but there's plenty of other peer review articles for the medical community. In the tax community, the highest level of peer review article is a journal called the Tax Advisor. So when I realized how wonderful these Roth conversions were going to be, and you have to be approved to write an article, I went to the Tax Advisor, who knew me because I've been writing in the IRA area, not Roth IRA because they didn't exist for years. And they said, yes, write about it. I wrote about it. We ran the numbers, and it was published at one article of the year. And that was the beginning of my, let's say, proselytizing. I spoke all over the country. I was in high demand, speaking for some of the wirehouses, some of the financial planning groups, the CPA groups, the legal groups, as well as end clients. So I did a lot of talking about it. I wrote 3 editions of Retire Secure, and in every one of them, and the one coming up is a little hint of the bonus of we analyzed Roth IRA conversions quite a bit. We did a dedicated book on Roth IRA conversions called The Roth Revolution, which is still, by the way, even though it is dated, it still has the classic concepts. And then, and again, this is a hint of what is coming, our most recent book that we are still working on. In fact, my wife is actually in the other room doing some last minute proofing on it. Retire Secure for Professors, which is great for professors, but I would say it is great for all IRA and retirement plan owners. And it is the best book I ever wrote. All right. And that and the hard copy of the book when it becomes available, which will be later in January. So you can just ignore a couple of chapters on specifically on TIAA and for professors and get literally the best thing that we have ever written. And part of it is because we hired a CPA writer And we also hired another number cruncher who spent a lot of time. I put my heart and soul into it. So we're really on top of these Roth IRAs. We covered that at length in the book. But anyway, Roths and I go way back. We did this peer review article. We were featured on the cover story of Forbes magazine in 2019. I'm a paid columnist in Forbes.com. We had 175,000 hits in the first 2 days of one of our articles. I've been quoted 36 times in the Wall Street Journal. I should have a count, but many of those had some aspect of Roth IRA conversions. As some of the longtime followers, you might remember my radio show that I had for about 5 years, and I tried to bring on the top experts like, I had Jack Bogle on, I had Jane Bryan Quinn on, and I had who I believe were some of the top IRA experts in the country. Ed Slott is probably the best known of all of us. Bob Keebler is a little bit closer to my way of thinking. Bob is a serious number cruncher, terrific resource, by the way, for, let's call it, advanced Roth planning. Natalie Schode, who's just wonderful, and she wrote what many people consider the Bible for retirement plans, life and death benefits for retirement assets. And we had a whole bunch of IRA experts. And interestingly, every single one of them was a Roth IRA conversion of some type or another. There's no such thing as a IRA expert who doesn't believe in Roths. And this is going to sound a little arrogant, so I apologize. But one of the reasons why I bring up the history and why I bring this up is this isn't a matter of opinion. This is a matter of math. Let's say that you like Barbra Streisand and I like Whitney Houston. We could argue till we're blue in the face which one is the better singer. And there is no 100% objective criteria that we could all agree on. But that's not true with Roth conversions. And I'm telling you this, well, maybe I'm bragging a little bit, but I'm telling you this because I don't want you to think, well, that's Jim's opinion. I want to listen to somebody that's closer to my opinion, which is I don't like doing Roth conversions, or I only like doing small Roth conversions. And I don't want you to brush off what I'm saying because you think it's my opinion and reasonable people can disagree. That's just not true. Again, if you accept some of our purchasing power ideas, that it really is something that is a matter of math. Now, does that mean that everybody should do a big Roth IRA conversion this year? Of course not. But it's a matter of math and personal preference, obviously, of when and how much to do. But there really is no such thing as an IRA expert who says nobody should ever do a Roth conversion. So anyway, we did this peer-reviewed article, and back then they didn't have all the fancy software that they have now. So we said, okay, let's take this, and we did it in Excel, believe it or not. And interestingly, we still do it in Excel for certain portions of the calculations. And we said, okay, let's run the numbers for our clients, and let's see if we can determine how much and when to do that. And we kept improving the results. We kept improving the process. And now, of course, we have the whiz-bang software, and we have this, actually some of the same people who did the calculations more than 20 years ago, still working with us. And then we have some new blood, but they're all, the people who are doing this in our office are highly quantitative. They love doing this, and we run the numbers and we can come up with when, how much, et cetera, for the Roth conversion. And we also, by the way, use something that sounds simplistic, but we actually use our own tax preparation software. It happens to be something called ProSystem FX, but you can think of it as TurboTax on steroids. So let's get to what I call the essence of a Roth IRA conversion. So what you're doing is you're taking, again, IRA, it could be a 401k, 403b, SEP-KEO, et cetera, money that you have not yet paid taxes on it, you're going to take that, and that's tax deferred money because someday somebody is going to pay taxes on it. You take that money, typically a chunk, not all of it, you designate that and say, okay, that's going to become a Roth conversion. You do the appropriate paperwork, that money becomes a Roth conversion. And let's say you have the money at Schwab or wherever you have it. Schwab's going to send you a 1099. It's going to say, please add, let's say you do a $100,000 conversion, please add $100,000 to your income. And then let's just say, for discussion's sake, to keep life simple, excuse me, that you're in the 24% tax bracket, then that would mean that you would be paying $24,000 in taxes on that Roth conversion. And then that $100,000 that you converted to a Roth is going to grow income tax free for the rest of your life, the rest of your spouse's life, and 10 years after you and your spouse are gone. And if you meet one of the exceptions, potentially longer. So here is the key. All right, I've been teaching this secret for, I call it the secret, and it's really critical that you get this. All right. The best way to measure IRAs or retirement plans is not total dollars. It is purchasing power. So let's take two people. They each have $100,000. All right. And they each have in an IRA. They each have $24,000 outside the IRA. Let's keep it simple. Let's assume a $24,000 tax rate. All right. So the one person does nothing. Let's call him Mr. Status Quo. What does he have? He has $100,000 in an IRA. He has $24,000 in after-tax dollars. And let's say he does nothing. Now let's measure the $124,000. If he wanted to use that money right now, what he would have to do is he would have to cash in his IRA, which would trigger a $24,000 tax. In this example, I conveniently have the $24,000 that he would need to pay the taxes on distributing the IRA. So he doesn't really have $124,000 of purchasing power. He has $100,000 of purchasing power. Let's say Mr. Roth IRA Conversion says, okay, I have $124,000, 100 in an IRA, 24,000 outside the IRA. I'm going to convert my IRA to a Roth, which is going to trigger a $24,000 tax. I have the money to pay the tax, and I'm left with $100,000 in a Roth IRA. Well, what if I want to spend that money? How much tax do I have to pay on the Roth IRA? The answer, of course, is none. So measured in purchasing power, you have the same amount of purchasing power on day one. So I'm going to be measuring in purchasing power because to me, that's much more meaningful than total dollars, because I would much rather have $900,000 of after-tax dollars where I could spend $900,000 than if I had $1 million in an IRA where I could only spend $600,000 or $700,000. So we're going to measure in purchasing power. And you might say, well, gee, Jim, you just broke even on day one. What about year 1, year 10, year 20, et cetera? So we ran the numbers, and what we found is even starting at age 62, doing a series of Roth IRA conversions, just 23 years later, you're better off by $1 million. And if you live longer, you're better off by well more than $1 million. And then if you go to the next generation, they're better off by even more. And by the way, that's, like I said, that is most likely to happen. So again, the numbers are just huge on how much better off a well-timed and the appropriate amount of Roth IRA conversions are appropriate.